So I hope you're all happy to sort of share microphones, but I'd like you to, pick who would like to go first and all introduce yourselves in whatever way you feel most comfortable. Maybe tell us a bit about how you understand your own politics, how you came to them. Do you consider yourselves socialists? People turn their recording devices off. Why or why not?
Live streaming, right?
And what do you understand that word to mean, regardless of whether you consider yourself one or not? What do you think it potentially means? Go on.
First of all, Greg's probably online anyway, even though he's sick. So yeah, I'm actually feel quite privileged to come here on his behalf, but actually in my own right as well. So anyway, I actually ran as an independent person in the last election, and because I don't actually affiliate with any political group at all, I don't feel that my voice is represented in any particular party at the moment. So I would call myself an actionist, a sort of reformed activist. I've always been really outspoken about the coastal environment and how no one gives it a look over. So that's what I ran on in particular, is lack of coastal environment protections, and also water quality. That was my big one after having been quite heavily involved in I guess an activist group in the early days in which we won in court. So I still have that deep in my heart, the real actionist side to me. So I would say I'm a socialist, but probably, I don't know if I'd classify myself as that holistically, but yeah, probably damn close. Yeah, thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa ngā mihi nui ki a koutou, no ingarani oku tipuna kei te noho o ki Aotearoa ko Sara Templeton aho. Thanks for inviting me, it's been really cool. So, like lots of people, but clearly not the crowd here, I spent most of my life not really thinking much about politics, but thinking more about the values and the causes that I was interested in, without really putting them in a political framework, mainly in the environment and community space. And it was the earthquake experience that led me to politics itself. So I was a residents association chair in Heathcote Valley, where we'd had quite a lot of damage, and got shoulder tapped to stand for the community board back in 2013. So I did that, really pushing for that whole council engagement, civic participation, and the community input into the rebuild and the chance to do something different with the city that hadn't been done before. In 2016, I stood for council, and by then I'd learnt enough about council to know the kind of impact you can really have if you know how to use the system and really make some changes. And that's what I'm hoping to do in the community and the environment sense. I've never personally been one for labels. I get labelled a lot, and people are never quite sure what they mean by it, or they've got a perception. I see the value in labels, which is good, and being able to find a like-minded group so you can work together and talk about the things that you care about. But currently, I think that the way the world is at the moment, with the really big challenges we've got, so things like climate change, inequality, if I, for example, just called myself left or socialist or those kind of things, I'm kind of discounting half the population from being part of the solution. And they are human problems, not just left or right problems. And I'm really keen to connect with as many people as possible to make those changes.
Thank you, well said. Kia ora koutou, my name is Celeste Donovan. I represent the coastal ward, so I'm over on the eastern suburbs, and the area stretches as far north as Brooklands and down to South Shore, so it's a pretty amazing area, and I feel very privileged to be elected since 2021 to represent that area. In terms of how I'd label myself, I think I've also always struggled to put a label on myself. I think I'm largely driven and motivated by values, what I'd like to see changed in the world, and sort of acting on that basis. So in terms of a little bit of history, I first sort of made my first foray into politics at university, like many of us, and dabbled around with all sorts of things. Did a bit of politics, did a little bit of American studies, which is fabulous, and all sorts. And I think the thing that I really took away was the importance of having a really critical approach to the world, and by which I don't mean doing your own research, but I do mean thinking things through, and using evidence and good judgment to inform opinions, and also listening as well. I think something that I really value as I've gotten older is that I do have strong opinions, but I've had to learn to also listen a lot more and understand other people's perspectives. And I think getting into local government was something that was sort of a bit of a surprise to me, I'll be honest. It wasn't part of a master plan, but I think I got there because I was motivated by my values and I was looking for something that would be meaningful, and the thing for me that was important was around making a difference in terms of, particularly in the coastal area, around giving people a voice and making sure that there was a strong voice around things that we will have to face and we can't avoid. So obviously we've got to address legacy issues. So Pages Road Bridge, you've got earthquake legacy stuff, but you've also got climate change, and those things are really important that we front up to, and I just didn't see that as something that was being spoken about within the people that had put themselves forward. So wasn't so much a choice. I think I felt a bit compelled because I was very frustrated, and sometimes that's a good basis to work from. And I guess in terms of socialism, I see the values within socialism as something that speak to me. So if on that basis that makes me a socialist, then I'd be happy to wear the title.
Kia ora koutou, everyone. I'm Melanie Coker, councillor for Spraydon. I've been involved with City Council, elected since 2013 on the community board, and since 2019 on council. And I didn't initially have any plans to run either. Sort of fell into being on community board. People that know me, I'm a Labour Party member, which makes me a social democrat. I will wear those labels proudly. So it was the Labour Party that got me involved in community board and let me know about that. And then they pushed me into running for council as well. But I'm very, very glad that I have. It's quite a chunky kind of role to have that can be quite stressful at times if you think things are going to go down a path that maybe is inequitable for people or sort of goes against our values. So I'd say as a social democrat, my values are about representative and participatory democracy, which I know others here as well are. I'd like to see, we have state regulation of the economy, and a big thing for me on council at the moment, and will be ongoing, I'm sure, for forever, is about public ownership of our strategic assets. So things like the port, things like the airport, that will just keep coming back to us for people that want a chunk out of that. So I really want to stand to stop that sort of thing happening. And I also believe in social equality or equity. Things like that council do, but also that central government do, universally accessible public services. You've got, hospitals and education, but also things like our libraries and things like that everyone can access. So, that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. As far as I did laugh, Sarah, when you said you get labelled a few different things. Yeah. Having tried to do a little bit of research and my own research, I suppose, on Facebook, and just seeing the sort of things that, apparently you two are a cult at the end there. It's what I keep reading from some of your particularly, top fans, as it's called on Facebook. Because you got... Oh, God, yeah, really? There you go. Yeah, it's interesting out there. People have strong feelings. So, interesting what you said, Melanie, about kind of a chunky and interesting role when you see things going a way that you weren't expecting, and like the authority of local government being something that I'm quite interested in, because I think local government is not always super well understood in terms of its role in New Zealand. Our civics education is maybe lacking, or it's just that you learn it when you're like 13 and you don't give a shit. That might be more what it is, speaking for myself. So like I'm sort of curious about the authority and responsibilities of elected members and of local bodies generally. If there was one thing you'd like people to know, any of you can jump in on this one. If there was one thing you'd like people to know about the role of city or regional councils, what would it be?
People underestimate how much impact council has on their daily life. You know, the government services are ones that you tend to use less frequently as a population, the hospitals, those kind of things. But on a day-to-day basis, it's the things that the council does, delivering water, sanitation, wastewater, parks, footpaths, roads, all of those things that have a major impact. Nearly 90% of our population lives in urban centres, and that makes a big difference for how we get around, our transport. It makes a big difference for our impact on our environment, and all of those things are council responsibilities. And so few people have a say that once other people start having a say, you can have a real impact. People underestimate their voice. You frequently hear people say, people don't vote because they're sick of councils and no one listens. The people who say that are people who currently engage and vote. When you do the research, people tend to say, I don't vote because I don't know enough. And so, yeah, I think that's the key thing. But you can have a real impact.
It's kind of tricky because, we've got 3 people here from a city council here, and I'm a regional councillor. The scope of what we do is actually quite enormous. We have to take into account the entire region, and not just the entire region of land, the entire region of marine space, which is out to 12 nautical miles. So 41% of my jurisdiction is actually out to sea, but it's really hard to get that acknowledged. But I just want people to probably understand the differences better, and for the Local Government Act to actually acknowledge the difference too, because when anything comes to be discussed, they talk about a mayor and the councillors, never about the chair and what their role is at a regional council. And it's really, really important to define the difference, because as it stands, we actually have no specifics in any government act. So, we're there as contractors, but we're paid a wage, and we pay ACC and the likes of that. We need to get some of this Local Government Act information and legislation really clear, and then more people will actually probably start to stand in different spaces. And more women, please, and more people of, different gender or transgender. Like, seriously, we need more people to come in and do this role. It's really super important. I don't think people understand how you actually take the role home with you. You take it to bed with you. You actually live it and breathe it, because it's very emotional space to be in at times. And yeah. Good.
Just on people standing for these sorts of roles, I think if you're the kind of person who thinks, I'd never want to do that, I think some of us may have also still think that sometimes now. But, you have to put yourself out there. But it's funny when you're in a situation where you want to see what you believe is a good outcome, and how that can motivate you to push yourself beyond who you would probably normally be. And and I think everyone has that ability to do that. So I think, for me, the key thing's having like-minded people that you can talk to that support you, and have. It is hard when you talk to people that have different points of view, and you really feel like you can't get to a common space. But yeah, I think, and like Sarah said, if there are people in this room that do come and talk to us at council, and it is really beneficial when people do that, because when we see your face and when we hear your stories, that changes often some people's decisions, and that is super powerful. So you should never ever underestimate that, and if you're scared to ever to come by yourself, then bring some more people with you, because the more people that are there, which people here have done, the better. So yeah, your voice is important, and it does. We have a huge role across everything that we do in the city. Yeah.
Cool. If we, I think I'll pick up a little bit maybe on what you mentioned, Genevieve, around the Local Government Act and the lack of clarity around that. Because I think it's somewhat fair to say that local government has kind of more power than a lot of people think, but is also pretty constrained by the Local Government Act, particularly around limitations of how it raises revenue, from what I understand, and the sort of limitations that puts on what councils can really do. You know, you don't have a reserve bank to draw from or anything like that. What do you see as the barriers in the Local Government Act on the one hand, and maybe also customary practices within your councils on the other? So by that I mean like the role of council officials, so staff and so on, and their understanding of their role versus elected officials. That create a barrier to sort of a strident and unapologetic left-wing agenda. Is there a political deficit there, though? Is it that it feels like you can't pursue a mandate to, can you not get an overwhelming mandate to pursue certain things because voter turnout is so low, which I think is fair to say for local councils, or is it more around the actual limitations of what authority and what power councils have to decide their own direction, or is it the way that councils are structured and the way that officials end up, sort of staff, bureaucrats have a lot of say over what's presented to you and what you can do? There's a bit there.
It's a great question. I'm going to focus on the second part of that, which is the kind of the customary side of it, because it's the thing that interested me when I was looking at what I wanted to do next and thinking about becoming aware of local government as this thing that I hadn't really thought about, which is interesting if you're interested in politics and yet you don't know anything about local government whatsoever. And I think the thing that I became really aware of by my first attempts to engage with the community board at that time was that it was really old-fashioned. I couldn't believe how... and it wasn't the fault of the individuals involved. They were operating within the constraints of that system, but it surprised me that it hadn't evolved, because it's that most local level where people should have the maximum ability to engage, but there seemed to be so many structural constraints to people engaging, and they were seemed like really simple things, such as the lack of technology that didn't allow people to engage outside of work hours, how formal everything is, the language, so many things that seemed that with a slightly different approach and a little bit of a willingness to adjust things, it would be a much more diverse space. So I think one of the first things that I really felt like was a good challenge was looking at the simple wins of what could change easily without overdoing things, because I think sometimes we can overdo things at council, believe it or not. And I think when I came to community board, one of those initial barriers really was how come we don't have live streaming? Why is this still a barrier? Because technology at community board is free, and why can't we just somebody set up a phone if that's required? And we did get there, but I think that still remains a barrier for a lot of people, because when people come to council to speak to us, a lot of people are extremely brave and they do put themselves out there, but I know what it feels like being someone that went to speak to council, how daunting it is. So I always really appreciate people that do come to speak and encourage you to come to speak if you don't already. But I think that we could go further and make it much more accessible for a broader range of people, because we do tend to not hear from a broad range of people at times on certain issues, particularly housing sometimes, and other things that are really critical to get that really meaningful engagement. So for me, that's kind of something that I think about a lot and would like us to go much further. And then the other thing, of course, is how people vote and all of that, but that's a whole nother thing.
And just follow on from there, but I mean, a council is a really large organisation that's tasked with doing a whole pile of things. And it's not just the Local Government Act, actually, because councils do a thing and do stuff under a range of acts. So we do dog control. We, do bylaws on a range of different things. And all of those are things that have been delegated to us by central government. And we've got a lot of people within the organisation who are familiar with these things. There's been rules and policies in place. Elected members are just regular members of the public who put their hand up at election time. Like, we're not highly trained officials working in a system knowing all the different legislation. And so we often get just as frustrated as residents when things aren't going well. But we do get the opportunity to try and have those conversations one-on-one to understand those. I think sometimes people think that council can do more than we can, though, too, right? For want of a better example, it's a very recent one, there was a truck. And council and council staff have to follow the law, right? If the law says that you have to use a process this way and you can't just pick up something and move it or whatever until you've got the right information, council staff can't do anything about that. I was talking to a guy this morning about a rockfall issue in Nowlan Street in Sumner, and we're working through that at the moment, and he's had no luck going through the council system. But an elected member and contacting an elected member can help those things move. So I've talked to staff today. I can get something done on that, hopefully by the end of the week, as a first stage. Rules get put in place because someone did something somewhere, and so someone put a rule in place to stop it happening again, and then staff have changed and now no one knows why that rule is there. So there needs to be some time spent, I think, unpicking some of that stuff so that we can simplify those systems. It's not easy. It's huge.
Once again, it's the city council versus regional council because it's such a different kettle of fish. I just think the confusion still remains with who's who, and I often get calls about, there's a river issue in the Heathcote or something like that, and it's like, well, actually that's not an ECAN thing, I'm sorry. If it's a discharge issue and there's pollution, yes, but it's actually an urban river, and ours are the braided rivers and the streams, and who does signage if there's an issue? Well, it's not ECAN either, unless it's in the parks or outside the city. It's a real confusion. Of course, the regional council takes over if something hasn't happened, but we have to know about it. So that is really frustrating at times, and I actually sometimes feel like just going and putting up a sign myself. But and I have done just quietly. But so I think I had a grand idea of what it was going to be like sitting as a councillor, trying to make change and doing it easily. Well, nothing's easy, and everything's a process. And I'm known as the dolphin lady with some people, or a water activist with others. But the fact is, you've got to know a bit about everything, and that's the tricky thing. I don't know much about buses. I'm sorry, but I do now. A little bit, but the people who are really good at what they do, you let them do it and you support them. But sometimes it's really hard to get support of people that you really think have you have each other's support. That's the big thing. When things get really tough, it's very, very difficult to be a single voice. You need people behind you. You need a village to make change, and I think that's the thing. We lose our sense of focus sometimes in a council situation because of the motions. But once again, I find with a regional perspective, I find the rural-urban divide is massive, and that sits around the table. And, I'm not going to lie, it's really tricky at times because we need water in the city. We share the same aquifers. And I don't believe that one group of people should have preference over another. That's one big gripe of mine. I also feel that although it is really changing, there's some archaic and old-fashioned practices. And at times, I'm going to speak out of turn probably here, but it's one of those nights, I feel. It feels at times a bit of an old boys club. And having 3 women round the table and the rest men and mostly rural is very, very difficult. But we know our stuff, us women round the table. If we don't know it, we go home and learn it. We're up till 2 a.m. sometimes, learning our stuff. So don't underestimate the power of us. And if you've got a gripe, tell us. We don't know unless you tell us. But as I say, change happens with a group of people. And if I'm a socialist and I can join tonight, I bloody well will. Excuse my language. Pardon my French.
I agree with what everyone has said, but I think overall, in my view, the staff that work at council are relatively progressive compared to the average, probably. And I think if we could, we wouldn't let them just run the city without us. But if we did, it would probably pretty good. And I think, and a lot of people here can't say it, but I think the thing that works against the left-wing agenda, if you want to call it that, or progressives, or just moving forward in a sensible way, and how my view would be, is really, it's the people that have connections to big business and can make money out of things, and it's really, really obvious, and they make their voices very loud and clear, and they are entitled, in fact. So they will bring their money in, and they will swing it around. I mean, it's quite obvious. So that is probably the biggest barrier that we actually have, and the best way to combat that is to have people elected who don't agree or align with that, really. So I think it's that simple in my view. But, yeah.
Yes, quite right. That's right. Here we go. We're getting into the fun part. No, thank you so much for those contributions. Really interesting. I think it ties in a little bit to what one of my next questions is about. Earlier on, you reminded me of this question, Sarah, actually, because this is around councils across the country, so different city councils, different regional councils, are often more or less politicised. And what I mean is often with more explicit party affiliations. Often there'll be front groups anyway. We all know what the front groups are, We can talk about People's Choice not all being Labour, but come on, let's be real.
They're not.
Yes, well. Yes, well.
Not anymore.
Yeah, they're not.
Just that there's greens in there too.
Yes, yeah. And then some places have a lot of independents, really, or there'll be small groups of just a couple of people, or there'll be independents, really, but they run under some sort of body, which is probably funded by a political party, but it's hard to figure.
Thank you very much.
No, not you. No. Heavens, no. I would never say such a thing.
I spent $1,100 on my campaign.
Yeah. And a good chunk of that is just the nomination fee. Yeah. So there you go. So here, we've got a mix of people, some who run as independents, but also I feel like I'm kind of ganging up because it's really only Melanie who runs with a group, from what I understand, but that's okay. She seems tough, I reckon. She'll be fine. I'd be curious about the reasoning for people's choices about being independent. I mean, Genevieve, you sort of said you've never felt like any political group has expressed your perspective fully. So, yeah. Yeah, and then others have run it as independents, but then I sort of wonder, Sarah, your shoulder tapped to run by who? So, community. Yeah, the community themselves. Yeah, I was just sort of curious if it was maybe one of these front groups, as we like to call them in the socialist left. Yeah, but I'll open that up to whoever would like to start.
Sorry, just while my brain's a bit fresh still. Mine's probably more about the things I say and the things I do are probably not appropriate sometimes, and I don't want that ownership to go on to anyone else except myself, because I am quite outspoken at times, and it doesn't come without some sort of commodity. But everything comes with rules and regulations, and I try to remain appropriate, and I think I'm educated enough to know some of the regulations and the RMA inside out. But sometimes when I'm going on a tangent now. I guess my background was actually activism and taking that a step further towards some legal action at times. And my frustration is the slowness of change, and sometimes it's actually an intentional slowdown rather than actually seeing the urgency of something and exacerbating some things into straightforward action overnight, or the equivalent of the fast track. But I don't mean fast track by that. I mean just come on and do something. So and if that comes with restrictions affiliated to a political party, I don't want that. I want to be able to do my thing and earn the kudos myself with the others that support me. So that's my thing.
I was a Green Party member for about a decade. So joined after the earthquakes. Joined because my values aligned, and met a whole pile of amazing people through that. And I've had support from a lot of those people over the years, which is good. It was a guy called Danny across the road when I was living in Heathcote who shoulder tapped me first to stand for community board. He's the guy behind the Wiki House project. I don't know if any of you guys know the Wiki House project post-quake. He first shoulder tapped me because of the work I've been doing in the community. But I did get green support, which was fantastic. And still in contact with many of them. I did resign from the party at the beginning of last year. And that's mainly because there's a lot of confusion in the community about what happens when you're a party member. So while I've been a party member, I have not been elected as a Green, if you know what I mean. Like, I've just been me standing, and I happen to do that like I might be a sports club member or whatever, right? But there's confusion out there about what parties can and can't tell you to do and those kind of things. And it's just really unhelpful when you're wanting to represent a really large group of people. And I know that there are people out there, because they've told me, that might be normally a National Party voter, but really like the work I've been doing in the community and support me as an individual, but would struggle to put a tick next to my name if I had the word Green there. It's that kind of thing. And if you're wanting to make change, the best way to do it is to be there and be working with as many people as you can. And that's why I've just stood, just me. Not to say that I don't think there's value in standing in a grouping, because I think there really is. It's really good having support and those kind of things. So it's just my choice. Yeah.
I'm going to go next. It is fantastic to be part of a grouping. It means that so People's Choice is Labour does have independents, and there are Greens now members, and we see us as I'd say we're a left-wing coalition, maybe. I don't know what you'd call us, but there's a lot of power there. It's cheaper for people to run because instead of doing a flyer for yourself for the whole ward, you've got 3 people contributing to that. So it's a lot easier for someone that has less to actually be part of politics and potentially get themselves elected, which I think has a lot of power. In terms of the parties and their involvement, they are involved in the selection process for who runs. We have a selection process, which means that hopefully we're never 100% successful with people that will stick around with us, but it does mean that there's a level of oversight over people running before just putting themselves out there for the public to decide. So I think in some ways it can give people a little bit of comfort, I guess, potentially, that there's others that believe that person is possibly going to do a good job. Also, MPs, and whether we're run by the Labour Party, I mean, we are not. We don't discuss pretty much any issue that we decide on with the party. We do it as a People's Choice caucus. I'm happy to be open about that. And we also discuss like-minded people on council as well before we make decisions. So I have given the proverbial finger to Megan Woods, which she continually reminds me about PC14, which was maybe a good, anyway. So, and that was, there were reasons for that. But, it's... yeah, we are not run by parties at all. It's really a support system, and it shows what our values are clearly, and that's all I see it as. And I've been involved for it's 12 years now, so yeah.
And I ran it as an independent in 2021. I don't know if a lot of thought went into it, to be honest, but I'd worked for the Greens and I'd had experience running campaigns, but I felt strongly about, through my working community, was privileged to work with quite a broad range of people, and I felt like it, there's pros and cons, but for me it was the opportunity to kind of focus on the issue and not be distracted by the so-called politics of it. And of course everything is political, but I feel like sometimes it can be confusing for people, especially in local government, as to what that means. So I think you can be clear about your values, but also be clear that your approach is actually about getting good outcomes, and that's really what my focus is. So, I really think that sometimes it can be challenging when you're affiliated with a political party, whatever stripe it is, because people will take a view on what you then... what your values are without actually getting to know you. And I think local government is very much about relationships and building relationships within community and building trust. And I think what's been effective for me is people get to know me and they have labels in their head and they do persist regardless. But I think that, everybody's an individual, and bringing your own unique perspective to council is quite important, and that way you can engage on that level, which I think's its own thing. It's not better or worse, but it's just different.
Marvellous. Okay, thank you so much. We are now at 7 minutes to 8, which is awesome, because I have one more question. And I mean, some of the answers might be long, or they might be quite short, but we'll ask this question, and it'll be one for all of you definitely to answer, I'd like to think. But it's a pick one. I've actually got 2 options for you. What are you most proud of in the last term, or what was your biggest disappointment? Yeah, or. Either or, not both. Which one do you think is more powerful, or how quickly can you explain them? Sarah, jump in.
It was hard to choose. I had one of each, but I'm going to go with what I'm most proud of. And actually, that was near the end of last term, really close to the election, and with actually the 2 beside me, staying true to our values and listening to members of the community and voting against covering the cost overrun for the stadium. I don't know about the others, but it was one of the most stressful times that term that we came through. There was enormous pressure to cover the $150 million cost blowout. A lot of submissions from a lot of people, and it was broken down by ward. So they said, in the Heathcote ward, this is how many people, this is the percentage of people that are going to vote in the election that wanted you to spend that money. And we said no. And it was a risk, but values over votes. And I'm really proud of that.
I mean, yeah, that was an interesting one. But it did sort of show, when it comes down to it, if you're put to the test, where you'll go. And I think that was kind of an important lesson for me, being quite new to council. And yeah, I just want to shout out to those on either side of me who also took that position, because I think if you look at where the rates is, people talk about it and they go on about all sorts of things like speed bumps, but if you actually look at the breakdown, the stadium's a big part of that, but we won't go into that right now. In terms of what I'm proud of, often it's the little wins. So for me, it was a recent decision by our community board, which was to progress a plan, which was a transport plan, which we all know is the most controversial thing that council ever does, it seems. And we had some funding from central government to make some improvements in our area in New Brighton, and it dragged on for many, many years. And then we finally got to the point of coming up with some options and went out to the community, and there wasn't overwhelming support for either option, which sometimes happens when you sort of do things in a bubble and you don't really test it with the community first. And through that process, I think staff did a fabulous job of really listening and engaging with us through that process and making it a bit more of a community-led process than many of the other similar processes that I've been involved with. And what we found was that actually by sort of pivoting a little bit and going, what are we hearing? Where can we go? What's the opportunity? And encouraging local participation in that process. So we had individuals come to our community board and look at plans and give us feedback quite early on in the pivot. We came to a really good outcome in that it was very widely supported. And I think when you have something that's normally so controversial between things like parking and active transport, and you get to a really good place, sure, not everyone's happy, but actually getting sort of 80-90% of those that do submit it to agree that they really like one outcome is actually pretty incredible. And I think that experience just left me with quite a positive feeling, because I feel like the more we can approach things from that perspective, the more trust we build with communities about getting good outcomes.
For me, it was, I can't remember the name of the process now, but we were, the CCHL, so that's our holdings company for our companies, it wanted to basically be able to sell some things off and get some shares and whatever they wanted to do. And we stopped that process. So I think that was very stressful, and I found it very emotional, especially on the day. Then got abused in the media by certain person. but that, for me, that was definitely the most important thing that we've done over it was more important, I felt, than the stadium vote, because we'd already gone through and I'd voted for the larger stadium and felt sick in my stomach for weeks actually after that. So I knew that I shouldn't vote against what I actually think ever again. So, yeah.
I don't know what to say now. The thing I'm proud of the most, actually the biggest achievement for myself personally and those that supported me around the table, under local central government, we have to have an operational and updated coastal plan that looks at ramifications of shipping, fishing, sediment, anything coastal that is a regional under our jurisdiction. We hadn't updated that. It should be updated every 10 years, so that would have meant 2015 it was reviewed. Well, it hadn't been. And so another 10 years almost rolled over and we still weren't looking at it. 2028 was the estimated time that it would be reviewed, and that's just under government policy that is actually extraordinarily delayed for what we were seeing out there. So I put a notice of motion through the council at the time and managed to get some long-term plan funding for an expedited version of that coastal plan. So I'm happy to say that as of this year, mid-year, it's going to get work on it. So I'm really proud of that.
Fantastic. We've absolutely nailed it. It's 8 o'clock. So we'll have a 10 or 15 minute break and then we'll come back from some questions from the floor. But just join me in thanking everyone for speaking, and do stick around. Thank you.
He would have taken over me and I would have had to pinch him or something.
He would say vague things about like access to water being equitable between the regions and the city. He would say, "Oh, this fucking
Are we on Chris Lynch now? Celeste declares herself the socialist. Megan was the woman that works in Megan Woods' office used to like produce his showers. Yeah, so she is drinks them.
Well, he gets really
You need to get her to say nice things about us. Things are going to work.
Okay, we're back to it. What a well-behaved audience. You're very well trained. That was a very natural hush. I really appreciate it. So that was fantastic. I really enjoyed that. That was really interesting. I think I learnt a whole bunch, both about the general topic of local government and leftish and left-wing politics and stuff, the limitations and so on. And sort of where the people to my left, maybe ironically, I'm not sure, we'd have to have more conversations, where they stand on certain things. And this is our opportunity for me to sort of take a speaking list. I should have grabbed a pen, but that's okay. I think I'll be able to remember, depending how many hands go up. But I'm happy to take a speaking list, and we'll start the questions opening down here.
Be kind, Rosemary.
Be kind, of course. Kia ora, taku. My question is around organising, because I'm out a Green Party person. I am involved in the People's Choice as a Green Party person, which is a minority in that place. But I believe in organising and organising for change. So my question is around organising both in standing for elections to avoid vote splitting, because a lot of the time we have too many people standing and the wrong people get in. So organising beforehand and organising as a collective around the table, the role of organising.
It's a free-for-all. Grab the mics as you see that you're inspired.
No one can do any of this alone, whether it's standing for election or actually once you're elected, because you need votes around the table to get things done. Being connected and being in a group is incredibly powerful. It's much easier. It's incredibly supportive and enabling. It's not easy though, and it's really time consuming, but it's worth the effort in organising. And we know, like, from the series of things that happen in Christchurch over time, all of the disasters we've had, that actually people come together to make change. And that's what we're good at as humans. So,
I mean, you can't get anything done without working with communities and groups that have an interest in council, and I think it's probably one of the most rewarding parts of the job. So if you're thinking about running for council, the great thing about local government is it can be quite lonely at times, but if you engage with the communities that you live in, and they're very diverse, you do get a real sense of accomplishment when you sort of hear people's concerns and you can work constructively with a wide range of people and see positive outcomes. And it might not be the outcomes you start out with, things evolve, but I think organising is a really critical skill that you learn on the job or you bring to the job, and because localism is such a key strength of local government. I mean, it's changing at the moment. We're getting pushback on that, but I think that's really where the strength of local government is working with communities that you represent.
In terms of running for election, I mean, we are organising, aren't we? But sometimes we organise and sometimes people come out of the woodwork to run against former fellow colleagues, so sometimes it's impossible to be perfect on that. But I think we do have open conversations, and I guess it's for everyone's benefit on the left to do that, and on the right as well. In terms of at council and community board, I think we do most of the time, but not always, have good discussions amongst colleagues to make sure that we are, well, to find out where everyone's sitting on something in terms of their views, and to try and, come to a consensus, I guess, and try and vote together where we have aligned views. It doesn't always work, and sometimes we make assumptions when we shouldn't. I can't think of precise examples, but there are definitely examples there. So I think we're doing a relatively good job, but I think we probably could do better sometimes. But I think we've been trying, and we can only progress from there, really. I'm sort of talking to the people that know about this and not... But, yeah, anyway.
I think there are probably possibly some specific examples around zoning rules and buildings and things like that, and that often splits some votes from what I've experienced from council. Yep. Did you want to jump in on this one as well, Genevieve?
Yeah.
Once again, it's a tricky separation between city and regional. It's really different, and even though I might represent, the city central here on the regional council, it's very much about some of the issues that take over parts of Timaru or the Waimakariri sort of cusp with rivers, and so it is hard to sort of have the support of everybody when you are entering into a rural space where people have their little networks and catchment groups and everything like that. So sometimes you just don't make friends when you're trying to get some water quality things done, or not just look at flood control. It's actually about the water quality and the river having its own values. So it is really difficult to be constrained to a city situation when your heart is actually in every other part of the region as well. So once again, like a lot of us around the table think the same, especially the more left group, but it's really hard to get those goals across the table when the rural divide is very clear sometimes. So yeah, I do think the community needs to support us, but when you're looking after a region, you can't be everywhere all the time. So I just guess actions speak louder in this situation sometimes, rather than... And no disregard, like honestly, city councillors have a really tough time and they attend so many different community things. But in reality, for a regional councillor, that is impossible. We can't attend green days and all that all the time because the rural people have that covered a lot of the time, and it's their territory. So you really have to try and do things at a distance and with integrity and consistency. And I feel like I've been doing that. So hopefully... I don't know, I haven't decided yet.
Great, I've got Dennis and then Nick. I'll pass you this, Dennis, because it helps people hear.
Thanks. My concern is particularly about the participation of the ordinary citizens via the community board to the council. I don't have a recent memory of community board work or of the council, the way the council treats the community boards. But I think in this day and age, maybe the time is to ask ourselves, do the community boards have enough power? And that means enough money to do things which are of real benefit to the area of the constituency. So we all want people's participation, and my impression is, I think I'm still right, that most citizens really hardly know who the community board is, and I'm sure that's not the will of the councillors on the community boards or the elected community board members, but it's the structure. And is this the fault of the Local Government Act? Is it from government? Is this why you are, in my words, so constrained? And to take away that constraint would mean actually a big budget and therefore a much greater presence among your constituents. So if you like to handle that one, thank you.
I'll start on that one. Thanks, Dennis. So 2 things in that one is that both our community boards are doing really well and then also not good enough. So when it comes to community boards on the South Island, so when I was a board chair, we met with other board chairs from across the South Island and discussed how our boards worked, what delegations we had from council, those kind of things. By far and above any other community boards in the rest of the South Island at least, we delegate way more to our community boards and give them the grant funding money, those kind of things to do. The Local Government Act says we can't just give them a big pot of money to do what they say. So the local boards in Auckland can, and they do have a set budget for other things, for pools and normal regular council services. It's not possible for community boards under the current legislation, and we have explored that. I was involved in writing a memorandum of understanding between council and community boards of my first term on council, following my experience on community board, but it just hasn't been revised or followed up this term, and it's supposed to be done within 6 months of the election. And community boards' time at council has been cut this term, and their connection to councillors has been cut back too. That needs strengthening again, and that needs to, how we do that needs to be a conversation with the boards, not to the boards. Yeah.
I mean, I would agree with everything Sarah's saying around community boards. I've spoken to former councillors about their experiences, and it seems that they're, in the past, community boards did play quite a significant role within those communities they represented, and I feel like we've kind of gone back to a very sort of almost centralised mode. Yeah, and I feel like we've lost something in that, and because of that, more and more of the sort of challenges fall upon councillors, because people don't understand sometimes the role of community boards and how significant they can be in terms of just solving everyday problems or working with community organisations. So sometimes I think what happens is councillors end up picking up that workload because people come to us because they know us, and it can take a while to explain what our job is, so we just end up doing that as well. So I would love to see more support for community boards. I think they play a really incredible role within communities. They know the people in the area. Where I work, there's 3 community boards that represent quite a diverse area, and when we come together, it's always a really rewarding experience, but we have so little time to talk and we have a lot to get through, and I just feel like it's really not working as well as it could, so I'd like to see some change.
I really believe in community boards and the local voice, and we get a lot of people coming and talking to our community board, and we've done a lot with you, Dennis, with the Sprayden Neighbourhood Network, but and we can achieve a lot through that. It's in terms of giving more money to boards. We could do that. I don't think it's a bad idea. The only difficulty is working out what powers you might give them, because I guess we as councillors are supposed to think about the city as a whole. And if you then start having some wards doing some things, it's already happening at the moment with cycleways, for instance, but some wards doing one thing in their area and other wards doing other things in their area, you start having a city that is quite different depending on where you live, which may be good because it represents the people that live there, but overall it may not be good for the future of the city as a whole, potentially. I don't know. So you're right. I haven't thought about it this term actually at all, and I think Sarah has done some good work with that, and we should look at it again. But we'd have to be very careful. Remember, some things come to council because boards can't even decide within the board what they want to do, so they flick it over to us and it becomes a nightmare. So
yeah. But we don't give them any training, right? But we don't give them any training. Like, we just say, right, you're a community board now. There's a little bit of induction. This is how council works. And then we don't say, right, here's some governance training. You know, these are the kind of things you might take. You know, we don't support them in that way. Yeah. And we should.
I feel like that question is very community board focused, and so I assume you don't have anything to necessarily add, because it's just a little different from ECAN. I was just giggling a little bit, imagining like maybe in Spraydon we have to drive on the right, and then we get to, you know, how much and what kind of power to devolve. I've got Nick and then our friend over here, and another 3. Fantastic. All right, Nick.
Kia ora all, and thanks for coming out tonight. I just had a quick, well, not really a quick question actually. I do have one quick one, which is, why don't we have STV voting in Christchurch?
We tried.
You
tried last term, it got voted down. We want to give it another go.
Yeah, cool. But
Can I just answer that as well?
Yeah, please.
I feel like that's probably where the left might need further discussions, because there's not a shared view amongst that issue, and that was quite a early disappointment for me when we couldn't get that across the line. Perhaps we should have done more groundwork in terms of organising, and I think that was a lesson, but at the same time I was surprised because it seemed like a pretty sensible option. Sorry, that was your short question, so I just wanted to respond to it because I feel strongly about that one.
Yeah, well, I know you feel strongly about the east side of Christchurch as well, and I live in Linwood, and I know that there has been a lot of regeneration work in Linwood, but you know, if we look at Linwood Village area, it's looking great. I know in New Brighton there's a ton of work going on, but it still feels like the east side of Christchurch, there are issues that would not be allowed to continue if they were in some of the richer suburbs. And do you feel that way? And I sort of think of things like the Shirley Community Centre, which, you know, hasn't been rebuilt since the earthquakes, and I know that there is a lot of people looking for that, and same thing with just the standards of the roads and beautification around that part of the city. Probably wouldn't continue to still be that way if it were in Mirabelle or Cashmere. Do you guys feel that there is an imbalance between the east and the west in Christchurch, and what can we do to level that out?
It's been very interesting being on council, because I understand that, you know, if you go by the numbers, there's been a significant amount of investment in the eastern suburbs, but if you look at the starting point for many communities, and I don't necessarily just mean the ward I represent, I'm talking about areas like Aotearoa, I actually think, you know, in terms of an equity lens, we should and do need to do a lot more in terms of how we communicate with people, what we focus on, and, yeah, spending more money. You know, I talked to someone recently in Bromley, and he was talking about the midges, and of course that's the thing that's really impacting people at the moment. And you know, it's a lived experience thing where you really treat people with respect and that you value their experiences. He was talking about how he'd prefer the midges over the stink, and you think, gosh, that's a tough situation. That's your choice. And he was talking about how his experience of living in the area was that just the level of service, the community facilities, and just maybe the respect for people's experiences hasn't been at the level that we should expect as the council. And, you know, through the wastewater treatment plant experience, I've really seen that, and I can really empathise. You know, I'm not immediately affected, but I've really heard a lot of people who are, and it's tough. So, yeah, I think there is a lot more we could be doing. And my experience at council has opened my eyes on that front. So, yeah, I'd like to see a stronger focus on that.
I'll just give you an anecdote. Well, the interesting thing, and I agree with what you're saying. The interesting thing, at our board, we've got Cashmere as part of our board. Is in the Spraydon, Heathcote and Cashmere Community Board area, we have people come in from Cashmere that say, oh, well, I spend $10,000 on rates or whatever it is a year, and you can't even do this park right here. So we get this whole thing, and they come in with slides with it all added up, like how much they've paid over the last 25 years or something, and how we, so this is how those people think, and so it's just interesting because it's quite. I found it surprising the first time I encountered that, and yeah. Entitlement. Again.
I think you're right though. There's some not. I think squeaky wheel's not the right word. It's just engagement. So people who have the time and capacity and the background knowledge and how to engage with council manage to see things for the community that others might not. And it's historic, so it's not just post-quake. We've got areas that are starting from a long way back, and there has been focus, especially in more recent years, on trying to lift those areas. It was really hard trying to convince some of my colleagues to vote for Te Pau Toi Toi initially. They're like, but they didn't have a pool. We need to do the rebuild. I'm like, yeah, they didn't have anything to start with, right? Like, it's the big gap in the city was that pool. And so it wasn't just about the rebuild, it was about lifting community. So there is stuff happening in the area. We're starting to green the space, and that was a community board project for planting street trees in Hereford Street, right? Like, because they're not a leafy suburb. And how do we help raise that amenity and those kind of things as well? So a lot of work to do. Yeah.
East Christchurch got to get good making graphs, is what I'm hearing. Big lib, sorry. Sorry, I've forgotten your name. I always do. Max, there you go. I was thinking Miles. That's not right. Max. I got Max and Rata and Daniel and Quentin. Can anyone who I didn't just mention
Peter,
chuck their hand up again? Cool.
Kia ora koutou. Sarah's answer touched really well on this topic. There's a big problem with representation in local government, right? And I was just reading in this article titled "The Case for Abolishing Councils," about how big a problem it is. One of the solutions they suggest is this idea of citizens' assemblies, right? The idea where you have these organisations where we bring in people that are designed to be a cross-section of society. You pay them for their time, so they have the time to really get involved in the issues, and they advise or tell council what to do. I believe it's being trialled in Wellington, if I'm not mistaken, but I might have that wrong. My question is, would any of you support that, and would you like to see that happen in the next term?
I put forward a proposal for one last term. So I was chairing the Sustainability and Community Committee with Mel as my deputy, and we put up a proposal for called it a community forum. It was really similar to a citizens' jury, a representative group. We hear a lot from the community that council doesn't engage well, and so this was one where during the long-term plan, council said, yeah, we'll set up a group to help council on how we engage with the community. So we put the proposal together with staff. It was really, really cool. We were going to get a representative group from the community to look at how council engages and look at look at what we do currently, and then look at a whole pile of stuff from the community about what they see, what they don't see, what would work, all of those kind of things. And then the community panel or forum, we're going to make recommendations to council on how we engage with the community. And councillors voted it down for various reasons, including I already know what the community thinks, or we should just go and get the community board members to knock on everyone's doors. Yeah, it was really disappointing. Wellington did some background stuff for their long-term plan. I've been talking to some people who ran the Auckland ones, because I'm really keen to do what they call deliberative forums. Similar, just not as quite as big and expensive as a citizens' jury. Auckland did one on water, and they've just recently done one on transport, and they were really successful. And I think we should be doing those kind of things, not just what's currently happening. The current community forum is, I think it's quite well attended, but it's only residents' associations representatives, and that's quite a narrow demographic. Yeah, so we need to be more representative than that.
was going to keep it short and say I think it's a great idea and I'd like to see more of it.
We are, I feel, a wee bit out of touch with the coastal hazards work, but we are in a way doing it with that because out on the east they tried to sort of move forward, work on climate adaptation, and it didn't go well. I'm not quite sure exactly when that was. Sarah knows this a lot better than me, but they've got experts on there. I think the benefit to what you're talking about is, from what I've heard, is that if you have a whole range of people who have different views together, but then they all hear from the experts without hearing from all their mates that, or whatever radio station they listen to, they may actually come to things with an open mind with some knowledge, and then that will actually get a good outcome. So totally agree. Yeah.
And then they're trusted more by the community too.
Yeah.
That was a really interesting question. I think what jumped out at me about it was like the cross-section of society is always like, who decides what a cross-section is and how is that represented? And especially from a socialist point of view, how much room do you want to give to people who have plenty of say and they have it through their extraordinary wealth, they have it through their connections and stuff. But I guess it sort of speaks to this trouble we have now, just to pontificate briefly, because I think I'm allowed to, having run this event, and just ask questions, to this question of, working people in New Zealand and the slow atrophy of civil society. So our ability to act through other kinds of organisations to get a point of view across has really, really slipped over the last 40 years at least, probably longer. It's longer than I've been alive. So it's an interesting problem, and the representative citizens jury, or citizens, the other term I forgot that you used, Sarah, there about in Auckland, could the deliberative forum, they could be really, really useful. But to the extent to which they express like a popular point of view is a really good question, because to what degree are people thinking about this stuff? Is it good enough to just randomly have people dragged in off the street or from whatever they're doing from their day job and asked, what do you reckon?
Can we add to that though?
Yeah,
So a bit more of a discussion. One of the things that they do is because the people who do this and then make a recommendation to council aren't politicians, they're not lumped in with the whole us and them thing, the community tend to trust it a bit more, which is, I think, really useful. I don't think it should replace wider community engagement, because otherwise people disengage completely, and I think that's a really good point. And we need to be careful over that. Yeah.
Great. Rata.
I'm Rata. I'm from Young Labour Christchurch. Puberty blockers and gender-affirming care has really been on my mind lately, because I don't know if everyone's aware about this, but Uncle Shane, former health minister, decided to do public consultation on medication, basically unheard of. But anyway, I was sort of wondering, what role could local government maybe have in gender-affirming care, particularly if puberty blockers are further restricted? Like, could local government maybe give more funding to queer communities, that sort of thing? Like, what role could local government possibly play in gender-affirming care, especially for youth?
So we're currently working with representatives from the community who, and it looks like we're going to meet quarterly, on some initiatives locally, including, there was a big call out a year and a half ago for Rainbow Crossing, those kind of things. Council won't have a specific role in for example, the puberty blockers and that physical health space, but when it comes to mental health, when it comes to inclusion, I think that councils play a really key role there. So helping people feel part of a city and welcome in the city is really important, that they are represented in the public sphere is really important, and that's a role that council plays. So we're actually, a couple of us elected members and staff are having ongoing conversations with representatives from those various groups. So Qtopia, Moana Bar, and others. So, yeah.
Daniel. Go.
I was just going to say, at Environment Canterbury, we've got quite a strong youth rupu, and some of the members, discuss all sorts of things with us, not always at the table, but sometimes in our, unique ways, and over cups of tea in the lobby or something. And I just think you've just got to support the voice that comes in the room, and it's not always eye to eye, but we're never going to have a massive say in things like restrictive drugs or things like that. However, you've got to include and support, and I think we do that pretty well, where a lot of us do. So, I guess finding the way of assisting in appropriate ways, we could probably do that and actually help find the way to, get some sort of answer from government. We've done that for a few different, people along the way. So, good question though. Thanks.
I guess it speaks to the way that, like, even if it's not directly under your delegated authority, you can still listen, you can still support, you can still sort of give people avenues and help them understand the avenues to do stuff. Daniel, then Quentin.
Cool. My question was around consultation and community involvement and that kind of stuff. Obviously, we've talked a lot this evening about the benefit of that, how useful it can be. But I guess the inverse is looking sometimes at the cultural of the culture. So culture of the council and staff. I think of a specific example recently is the Dog Control Act. The process felt very predetermined. The survey felt very much leading, and it felt really performative. And I think a lot of people's involvement with the council are through something they had a passion with, and then they kind of got this, cool, this is just a play, the answer was already made. I know that comes more from the staff side, because that's a legislation thing coming out of the dog control team. How can that stuff feel more worthwhile? Like, how can participation in these processes feel like it is going to change an outcome?
Bylaws are really tough because we are governed by some legislation around that and how we do that. So one way is to make sure that we're really clear about what people can have an impact on and what they can't, like which things we just legislated we have to do and which things you can. We're also not very good at communicating the changes that we do make. So I can't remember a hearings panel or any of those kind of things where we haven't made changes based on community feedback. And we let those people know that we made a change based on their feedback. But the wider community generally don't know that we've made changes. They just go, oh, it's done. But we always make changes based on community feedback because the community knows so much more than just a small group of people working on it in council. So I don't know how to do that because people often don't take any notice if it's something that doesn't directly affect them. But we do change things. So yeah, I don't know if that helps.
From what I'm hearing is the way it's worded. I think with the dog control one, I can't even remember if we've done the informal consultation or just the initial one. Because we had we've done both.
I think we've done both now.
Yeah, so we had an informal initial one, and then the second one was based on that, which is possibly how it started to sound predetermined because I'd already heard from the community already. But I think what I'm hearing is that there needs to be a step, because we don't see the consultation material. We just say, yes, go out to consultation, but we don't see it before it actually does that. But there possibly should be a step in between where there's just ordinary, I don't know, again, who's ordinary people, but some people can look at it and actually have a look and see if it seems biased, because there are other consultations that are like that as well. So I don't know if that's sort of what you're meaning, but we definitely do. I mean, if you were to...
That was purely an example, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, but if you come in and if you do a written submission, and then especially coming to talk to us or contacting people individually, though you're not supposed to really do that in that process, then you, we can hear what you have to say. So I don't think Yeah, I don't think anyone should ever feel that the decision's been made, because the decision isn't made at all. I mean, we almost always have arguments about things at the council table, if anyone's watched that. So, yeah, I don't know if that helps, but...
Although it's a city particular survey you were talking about, it's similar because, initially, before any consultation, it's usually an engagement process where you get the flavour of people's concerns, and you also look at things like actually accurate surveys. I was part of one of the surveys on dog control and counting dogs on beaches, especially the estuary around the Godwits. So that must be taken into account because it's all audited stuff. So I guess you've got to have some options there to go out for a consultation, and in order to get the right options, you must listen to the community and have a status quo. But limiting people's options and feeling like it's got a bit of a predetermined feeling, then you need to actually talk to someone about that. That's my feeling, is that, whether it be the council itself or someone else that's independent, and just say, this doesn't feel quite right. And you've got to be that person today. That's just my feeling.
One of the most difficult things I find at council is communicating how we make decisions. And if you've got something, a controversial topic, and you ask for feedback, you've done early engagement, and that formed the options that got put forward, and then you put something up for consultation, and you get the responses back, and around half the people think, actually, that's pretty good, and it's kind of what we were after. And then in the other half are like, actually, no, we don't like that. And then you make your decision based on the community feedback. You might make some tweaks, changes. You've listened to the expert information from staff as well. You make a decision, and half the people say, you didn't listen. It was predetermined. That's almost every decision we do. It's actually really hard, and to convince people that we did listen, but we disagreed. And actually that's an okay position to have, but it's really tough to communicate. Those people who agreed with the decision and that's what they were after will feel pretty happy, but then they'll think we're predetermined on the next one when we disagree. And it's really tough, and it needs some way of communicating it better.
Great. I've got Quentin and I've got Pizza Hands. I've forgotten your name, mate, but I did meet. And then I'll cut it off there because we are getting close to 9 o'clock. But go ahead, Quentin.
Very, very quickly, just in relation to your question, Christchurch actually did have proportional representation, 5 times as high as the way.
Wow.
I won't talk about the Labour Party's role in sort of getting rid of it. I suppose my question is really a bit of a wider one. It relates to what Max has said and also what we've been saying too, which is related to really, do people actually fully understand what the council actually does? And I refer to it, particularly voting turnout. And I've been involved in politics since 1982, when Labour was a city. Voting turnout has actually decreased, all the way through there. And people talk about, PRs, magic bullet, or citizen forums. I don't see, as being the magic bullet, but yet it keeps on decreasing. And I suppose I'll be interested in your thoughts as to what to do in terms of arresting this. How do you think that people perceive the city council? Because I think that people don't understand the council. They don't understand their real role as a council.
There's no one silver bullet. There's more engagement. There's, we've got no post boxes left. And we've got a 3-week postal period, and people change addresses, and people are renting. There's a myriad of things. Very little money gets spent around election time by local authorities on education about the election and what councils do, because it comes out of council budgets, and everyone's trying to keep their budgets low. I think that the Electoral Commission needs to play a role in helping people understand local government and local government elections. and that needs to happen soon. Unfortunately, the report on the future of local government was pushed to one side as the woke report, but there was some good stuff in there too.
I mean, I think Sarah's kind of covered it, but I think council is still, we haven't moved that far ahead sometimes, it feels like, from the old boys club in some respects, and that we're very lucky in that, you know, we get a lot more support than and paid a lot better than many other city councillors around the country and regional councillors. And, you know, once upon a time you did it because it was kind of a status thing, and you did it because you could afford to do it as a hobby. And I don't know if we've really evolved enough past that. I think we really need to look at how we support people to do their jobs properly, how we can make sure that local government has significant mana to do its job properly, because it plays such an outside role in people's lives. There's just so many places we need to make changes. Civics, education's critical, and getting younger people engaged. I mean, everyone says that, but in voting, yeah, because, you know, like I said, I really only came to understand local government very late in life, and I don't understand why that is. I just somehow missed the boat on that. So I'm pleased that it's changing, and we do have a lot of really talented people putting themselves forward, of all, you know, backgrounds, but we've got a long way to go.
It's a tricky question because I don't think anyone knows the answer. I was just sitting here thinking, and I haven't thought this before, you are more likely to vote if you know your people that you're voting for, right? And that's incumbent on us to get out, and I probably personally don't do that enough because I've got lots of stuff to do. But we also could look at, I mean, a great thing we could look at, and I don't think this would happen, but it would be better if we actually had more elected representatives on council, so they represent a smaller area and you're more likely to know who that person is, which is what we have had at one point in the past. It has also had less people too. So that could possibly be a help. It's a whole lot of things that would come together really, but the voting, yeah, the postal voting. I mean, I can't understand why nobody knows how to post a letter personally, but I hear that that is a great problem for people because I love posting letters. But yeah, there's a whole lot there, and yeah, having some money to actually advertise, you know, without the council having to do that would be really good to get the names of people out there. Yeah.
I think we should actually have mandatory voting like we do in some countries, and I also think we need to enable online voting systems. If we can pay our IRD tax online with a Real Me profile, why the heck can't we vote online? It's really antiquated, and it's almost designed so that people don't vote. We need to change it through the LGNZ, we need to change it through central government, we need to change it at a local level, even if it's a Canterbury-wide act that we can actually enable people to do things differently as a test study. And I'm really strong on that because they do it overseas. And if it's done right, then it's not a risk. It's more of a risk having people not being able to vote.
Fantastic. All right, I'll take the last question just at the back here.
And this will actually be a quick question. Rates. It seems like the only thing a lot of voters care about is keeping rates low. The left is never going to compete against the right on keeping rates low. How do you campaign against that?
Sorry,
I'll repeat the question just because it was at the back. Basically, a lot of people only seem to care about keeping rates low. The left is never going to outcompete the right on that particular topic. So how do you campaign against it?
It's not easy. And while a lot of people care about rates, it is a big issue, and I'm sure that people will be pushing it this election, including central government are pushing it about local government. When we do our long-term plan and we get lots of submissions, there are a lot of people who say, I'm okay with paying rates because I recognise the good that it does for us as a city. I just want to make sure that you're spending it wisely. And for a lot of people, that's the key thing. Like, people recognise that there's a common good in the services that council provides. But they hate waste, and things that they are perceived as waste. And so I think that needs to be a focus, and being able to give people options. So, so if I ran a long-term plan, I'd be giving options to people so people could have a real discussion so they can really see what the impact would be. I don't think it'd be pretty, and I don't think people will go for it. Every time you talk about closing libraries, there's an uproar, you know? And I think that there's not enough education around what our rates pay for and how valuable that is for a city.
Once again, the difference between city and regional. Most territorial authorities, like such as city, they collect rates on our behalf. So the invoicing actually comes out all in one, and it gets very confusing for people. They think that this large chunk is somehow related to certain things, and it's not always the case. So I personally, and this is not speaking for council, but I would like to see them separated, because what we do with the rates, and for a very long time, up until this past year, I believe, we didn't include inflation. And for once, we actually had to, because we can't do the things we need to do with our environment with the small amount that we're trying to, rub two coins together sometimes, and we're not getting the money from government like we should. The incentive is not there, and it's really hard to spend the money you haven't got. So separating the invoicing would be perfect to show really the true value of an entire region on one invoice. So that would be my thing. But yeah, rates, I don't know what else to say about it, so thank you.
I agree with what Sarah said. I actually was quite impressed with the last ECAN LTP, because it was separated out into different parts of what they did, and you could choose the low, medium, high, and it actually gave values for that, and see what you would get. I don't know if it's probably more simple to do that for Environment Canterbury than it is for the City Council, because the City Council does so many little things.
They did that online. They did a similar thing online, where you could choose your money for different areas,
that's right. But it was
very good. It was like being a gambler or something.
The visualisations were very good on that, I thought, actually. The council long-term plan, which is what LTP is, if anyone is not.
Early engagement. It was really good.
That was very good.
Yeah.
But you realise how... Sorry, I'm talking too much. I might need the mic back. But you realise how much you had to choose, and that was the scary thing. And no one really wants to have to put something back when they really feel passionate about it. But like us councillors have to make those decisions at times, really. And we've got an annual plan coming up too. Good God. Sorry.
I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. I think explaining to people what the choices are is quite key. When people talk to me about going back to basics, I always like to ask them what that means to them, because they might have been in favour of the stadium, for instance, and or whatever it is. So, an understanding where council spends the majority of its money is helpful as well, because we all know that there's a lot of things that people say we spend a lot of money on that we don't. So, I don't know if it's as simple as better education about what council's spending its money on, but I did notice that ECAN had done a pretty fantastic job. Not to say City Council staff aren't doing a great job, but, the more we can do in that space to really break it down for people. And I do think framing everything about rates is so simplistic that people don't have the opportunity to really engage meaningfully on what that means. And I think part of our job is actually stepping out of that simplistic conversation and saying, what we're delivering is a way of experiencing the city, and it's not just a short-term thing either. We have to look ahead. So let's talk about what's important and what where our money goes and what that delivers for everybody, and then I think you can start from there and actually have quite a constructive conversation.
Lovely. I think that's a nice way to end it, that the conversation is better set on what kind of city do people want to live in rather than how much it's going to cost. That can be the second question. Thank you so much, everyone, for sticking around. It's been a really lovely evening. As I said earlier, if you aren't on our mailing list and would like to be and like to come to future events, there's a mailing list around the corner. I think there's only like 2 or 3 members of the exec here today, but if we put our hands up, if you want to ask us about stuff about the Canterbury Socialist Society in particular, please feel free to. I don't know if the staff are going to be trying to kick us out really quickly from here. If not, do try and corner your councillor, especially if you're voting for them. And Sarah's pretty unlucky running for mayor because all of you can probably vote for her, so that means she's going to be really stuck. I think I can vote for Genevieve, but I'm not in anyone else's ward, so they don't have to talk to me after this event is over.
Greg, don't listen.
Oh yeah, to be fair, I better vote for Greg. He'll be really mad. Yeah. Oh, there you go, perfect. Thank you all so much for coming. I will quickly, encourage you all to join me in thanking our speakers, and I've just got some gifts for them as well.
Some of you don't dry January, which is terrible, but you can wait.
No.
Dirty January.
We didn't make it. Oh, you can have a sticker.
Yeah. Oh my God, what is it?
It's
Thank
just,
you.
we didn't make it. I just put a sticker on.
Oh, that's
It's
very
a red.
so
It's homemade, isn't it? No, it's not.
And just a copy of the most recent.
Who would like a wine? I don't drink it.
Oh,
Oh.
Thank you so much.
thank you very much.